She dressed up ugly to ruin the arranged marriage, acting like a complete brat to scare him off. Instead, he announced their engagement with a cold smile. What she didn't know was that she'd just agreed to marry the city's most feared mafia boss, and he'd been hunting for a queen all along. Isabella Romano stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror of the gas station bathroom, barely recognizing the creature looking back at her.
Perfect.
She looked absolutely hideous. Her usually sleek black hair was now a greasy, tangled mess thanks to 3 days of dry shampoo and strategic musing. Dark circles ringed her eyes, courtesy of purple eyeshadow smeared in all the wrong places. She'd even chipped her front tooth with a nail file that morning, giving her a gap-toothed grin that would make any potential suitor run screaming. "You've got this, Bella," she whispered to her reflection, practicing her most obnoxious laugh. No man in his right mind would want to marry this disaster. 20 minutes later, Isabella burst through the mahogany doors of Romano's Italian restaurant like a hurricane in a cheap polyester dress. The private dining room fell silent as she stumbled in, deliberately catching her heel on the Persian rug. "Sorry I'm late," she announced in the most grating voice she could muster, throwing her knockoff purse onto the pristine white tablecloth. Traffic was, totally crazy. Her father, Vincent Romano, looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. His face had gone 3 shades of red as he gestured helplessly between his daughter and their guests. "Isabella, sweetheart, this is..." "Oh my God, is that real champagne?" Isabella interrupted, grabbing the bottle of Dom Perignon before anyone could stop her. She took a swig directly from the bottle, letting some dribble down her chin. "Wow, this place is fancy. Daddy, you didn't tell me we were meeting royalty or whatever." Across the table sat the D'Angelo family. Mrs. D'Angelo clutched her pearls like they were a lifeline, while Mr. D'Angelo's mustache twitched with barely contained horror. But it was the man sitting at the head of the table who caught Isabella's attention. Adrian D'Angelo. Even through her performance, Isabella felt a chill run down her spine. He was nothing like the photos her father had shown her. Those had been corporate headshots, sanitized and professional. In person, Adrian D'Angelo was devastating in a way that made her forget to breathe for a moment. Dark hair, sharp jawline, and eyes the color of steel. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than her car, and when he looked at her, Isabella felt like he was seeing straight through her act to something deeper. Something that terrified her.
But she was committed to this plan.
Her freedom depended on it. "So, you must be Adrian." Isabella plopped down in the chair directly across from him, ignoring the way her father winced. "I've heard literally nothing about you. Daddy's been super secretive about this whole blind date thing." "It's not a blind date, Isabella," her father started, but she was already reaching for the bread basket. "Whatever. I'm starving. This diet I'm on is killer. I've only had Red Bull and Pop-Tarts today." She grabbed a dinner roll and took an enormous bite, chewing with her mouth open. "So, Adrian, what do you do?" "Let me guess, accountant? Insurance? Something super boring?" For the first time, Adrian spoke. His voice was low, controlled, with the faintest hint of an accent Isabella couldn't place. "I manage various business interests." "That's code for boring, right?" Isabella laughed her practiced hyena cackle. "God, I hate business. Numbers make my brain hurt. I'm more of a creative type." She knocked over her water glass, accidentally, watching as the crystal tumbled and shattered on the marble floor. The sound echoed through the restaurant like a gunshot.
Oops.
"Butterfingers." Isabella giggled, making no move to clean up the mess. 3 men in dark suits appeared almost instantly to handle it, men Isabella hadn't even noticed before. They moved with military precision, and she caught a glimpse of something metallic under one man's jacket. Weird. Really weird. "Isabella Marie Romano," her father hissed, but she was on a roll now. "So anyway, Adrian, I should probably tell you up front, I'm not really marriage material. I hate cooking, I'm terrible with money, and I have this thing where I can't commit to anything. I've had 17 jobs in the past 2 years. Oh, and I'm probably gonna inherit Daddy's gambling debts, So there's that financial burden for whoever's unlucky enough to marry me. She reached for the expensive china teacup, fully intending to accidentally drop it, when Adrian's hand shot out and caught her wrist. His grip was gentle but firm, and Isabella felt a jolt of electricity at the contact. Those steel-gray eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, the act faltered. There was something predatory in his gaze, something that made every instinct scream danger. "Careful," Adrian said softly, his thumb brushing across her pulse point. "Some things are irreplaceable." Isabella jerked her hand back, heart hammering.
Right. Sure.
Whatever. She was losing momentum, and she knew it. Time for the nuclear option. Standing abruptly, Isabella grabbed the remaining bottle of wine and tripped, sending the contents splashing across Adrian's pristine suit. The expensive fabric darkened with a deep red stain, and Isabella braced herself for the explosion of anger. It never came. Instead, Adrian calmly pulled out a handkerchief and dabbed at the wine. His movements were controlled, almost methodical. When he looked up at her, there wasn't rage in his eyes. There was calculation. "Mr. and Mrs. Romano," Adrian said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Mrs. D'Angelo, I believe we've seen enough." Isabella's heart soared. Finally, her plan had worked. She'd been so obnoxious, so completely undesirable, that even this mysterious businessman couldn't stomach the thought of. "The engagement is acceptable to me." The words hit Isabella like a physical blow. She actually stumbled backward, staring at Adrian in shock. "I'm sorry, what?" she gasped. Adrian stood, wine still dripping from his jacket, and smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "My empire needs someone bold, someone unpredictable. Someone who isn't afraid to make waves." His eyes never left hers. "You'll do perfectly, Isabella." The room erupted in surprised murmurs and congratulations, but Isabella couldn't hear any of it over the rushing in her ears. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. "But I spilled wine on you. I broke your glass. I've been nothing but horrible." "Yes," Adrian agreed, stepping closer until she could smell his cologne under the wine. "And yet you haven't once apologized or shown an ounce of fear." Fascinating. As the families began discussing wedding dates and arrangements around them, Isabella caught something in Adrian's expression that made her blood run cold. The way he commanded the room without raising his voice, the instant appearance of those suited men, the careful way everyone deferred to him despite his young age. This wasn't a businessman. This was something else entirely. And she just walked straight into his web. 3 hours later, Isabella sat in the passenger seat of Adrian's black Mercedes, her hands trembling as she stared out the tinted window. The celebration dinner had been a blur of forced smiles and wedding planning she hadn't consented to. Every time she'd tried to object, Adrian would place a firm hand on her shoulder, a gesture that looked protective to everyone else, but felt like a leash to her. "Where are you taking me?" she asked as they drove through the industrial district, far from the upscale restaurant where their families were still toasting their happy news. "Somewhere we can talk privately," Adrian replied, his voice maddeningly calm. Without interruption, the car pulled into an empty warehouse parking lot, and Isabella's pulse spiked. This was exactly the kind of place where people disappeared in movies. Adrian killed the engine, and the silence stretched between them like a razor wire. "Look," Isabella started, turning to face him, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but—" "No games," Adrian's steel-gray eyes fixed on hers. "Just business." "Business? You call announcing our engagement without asking me business." Adrian leaned back in his seat, studying her with the same intensity as a scientist examining a specimen. "Tell me, Isabella, what do you know about your father's assets?" The question caught her off guard.
What?
"Nothing. I don't care about Daddy's boring restaurant stuff." "Restaurant stuff," Adrian's laugh was cold. "Your father owns prime real estate in 12 different neighborhoods. Warehouses, shipping facilities, import licenses. Romano's Italian restaurant is just the front." Isabella's stomach dropped. "Front for what?" "Nothing illegal, surprisingly." Your father is legitimately naive. Adrian pulled out a tablet, swiping through documents. But his holdings are strategically placed. Ports, transportation hubs, legitimate businesses that could easily expand their services. You're talking like some kind of... Isabella stopped, the pieces clicking together. The men in suits at dinner. The way everyone deferred to Adrian. The calculated way he'd accepted her sabotage. Oh my God. You're... I prefer the term businessman with extensive interests, Adrian interrupted smoothly. But yes, Isabella. You're beginning to understand. Isabella's hand shot to the door handle, but Adrian's voice stopped her cold. I wouldn't recommend running. We're in one of my neighborhoods now. She turned back to him, fear and fury warring in her chest. What do you want? Your father's properties. His business licenses. His connections. Adrian scrolled through more documents. Married to you, I gain legitimate access to everything he's built. Clean money, respectable fronts, zero questions asked. So this is about money? You could just buy. It's about legitimacy. Adrian cut her off. My empire operates in the shadows, Isabella. Always has. But times are changing. I need to move into the light, and your father's businesses are the perfect bridge. Isabella felt sick. You planned this. All of it. Your father approached my family months ago, looking for investors. Did you really think that was coincidence? Adrian's smile was razor-sharp. I researched the Romanos extensively before agreeing to meet. Your little performance tonight was entertaining, but ultimately irrelevant. Then why not just force Daddy to sell to you? Why this marriage charade? Adrian leaned closer, and Isabella caught that dangerous, predatory gleam again. Because forcing him would draw attention. But a marriage? A romantic union between families? That's a beautiful story. The Mafia prince and the innocent restaurateur's daughter. I'll tell everyone what you really are, Isabella said desperately. I'll expose you. With what proof? I'm a successful venture capitalist with an impeccable reputation. Harvard MBA, charitable foundations, political connections. Adrian's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. You, on the other hand, are the daughter of a man whose business is about to face some very serious financial difficulties. What are you talking about? Adrian showed her the tablet screen. Isabella stared at the documents, loan papers, tax assessments, inspection reports, all bearing her father's signature. Your father's been operating on borrowed time, Isabella. Loans from some very impatient people. Health department violations that could shut down his restaurants. Tax audits that could bankrupt him overnight. Adrian's finger traced the numbers. It would be terrible if all of these problems surfaced simultaneously. Isabella's blood turned to ice. You're threatening my family. I'm offering them protection. There's a difference. What if I refuse? What if I just walk away? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was completely devoid of emotion. Your father would lose everything within a week. The restaurants, the properties, his savings. Your mother's medical bills alone would destroy whatever's left. Isabella's hands clenched into fists. Her mother had been fighting cancer for 2 years. The treatments were expensive, and insurance only covered so much. This marriage protects your family, Isabella. It ensures their safety, their prosperity. Adrian reached out and touched her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. And it ensures my dominance in this city. You can walk away, but your family won't survive. Tears burned behind Isabella's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You're a monster. Yes, Adrian agreed simply. But I'm a monster who keeps his word. Marry me, play the role of the loving wife, and your family will want for nothing. They'll be untouchable, protected. And if I don't, then tomorrow morning, the health department will find some very serious violations in your father's kitchens. The IRS will discover discrepancies in his tax filings. His loan payments will mysteriously fail to process. Adrian's voice remained conversational, but his eyes were arctic. Your mother's insurance will lapse due to a clerical error. Isabella closed her eyes, feeling the trap close around her. When she opened them again, Adrian was watching her with something that might have been sympathy. I don't expect love, Isabella. I don't even expect you to like me. I just need a wife who can smile for the cameras and help me build something legitimate. How long? She whispered. As long as it takes. Years, probably. Isabella stared out at the empty parking lot, weighing her options. There weren't many. Her family's survival against her freedom. Her mother's life against her own happiness. It wasn't really a choice at all. Fine, she said finally, her voice barely audible. I'll marry you. Excellent. Adrian started the car again. The wedding is next week. As they drove back towards civilization, Isabella made herself a silent promise. She would find a way out of this. She would find Adrian's weakness, his vulnerability, and she would use it to destroy him. She just had to survive long enough to find it. The wedding happened like a fever dream. One moment Isabella was sitting in her childhood bedroom, staring at a white dress she'd never chosen, and the next she was walking down the aisle of St. Mary's Cathedral while 300 strangers watched. The ceremony had been planned with military precision, every detail handled by Adrian's people, while Isabella felt like a passenger in her own life. Her father walked beside her, beaming with pride and relief. He had no idea he was delivering his daughter to a predator. You look beautiful, sweetheart, Vincent whispered as they approached the altar. Adrian's a good man. He'll take care of you. Isabella wanted to laugh. Or scream. Instead, she forced a smile and kept walking. Adrian stood waiting in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, looking every inch the successful businessman. But Isabella could see past the facade now. The way his eyes tracked every guest, every movement. The subtle hand signals he gave to men positioned throughout the cathedral. The earpiece she glimpsed when he turned his head. This wasn't a wedding. This was a hostile takeover with flowers. Dearly beloved, the priest began, and Isabella's vision tunneled. The words washed over her like white noise. She responded when prompted, her voice sounding foreign to her own ears. When Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands were steady as stone. Hers were shaking so badly, she could barely hold still. You may kiss the bride. Adrian's lips were warm against hers, and for one insane moment, Isabella felt a flutter of something that wasn't fear. Then reality crashed back, and she pulled away, her cheeks burning. The reception was a blur of congratulations and champagne toasts. Isabella smiled until her face hurt, accepted well wishes from people she'd never met, and tried not to notice how many of Adrian's business associates looked like they could break someone in half without breaking a sweat. Time to go, Adrian murmured in her ear as the band played their third slow song. Go where? Home. The word sent ice through Isabella's veins. This morning, home had been her parents' house with its creaky stairs and familiar smells. Now home was wherever this dangerous stranger decided it would be. They left in a convoy of black cars that screamed money and power. Isabella sat in stunned silence as they drove through parts of the city she'd never seen, past gated communities, and into hills she didn't know existed. When they finally stopped, Isabella's breath caught in her throat. The estate sprawled across what had to be 20 acres, all rolling lawns and carefully manicured gardens. The house itself looked like something from a movie, all stone and soaring windows, with ivy climbing the walls. It was beautiful and imposing and absolutely terrifying. Welcome home, Mrs. D'Angelo, Adrian said, and Isabella flinched at the name. Men in dark suits flanked the entrance. Not wedding guests or caterers' guards. Armed guards, based on the bulges under their jackets. They nodded respectfully as Adrian passed, their eyes tracking Isabella's every movement. Why do you need so much security for a house? Isabella asked as they walked through a foyer that could have fit her parents' entire restaurant. Successful businessmen make enemies, Adrian replied smoothly. The interior was even more overwhelming than the exterior. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork that looked museum quality. Everything was pristine, cold, expensive. It felt more like a fortress than a home. Your rooms are upstairs, Adrian said, leading her up a curved staircase. We'll maintain separate bedrooms for now. Rooms? Plural? Bedroom, sitting room, private bath, walk-in closet. I had your things moved from your parents' house. Isabella stopped dead. You went through my stuff. My people did. Thoroughly. Adrian's tone suggested this should be obvious. Security protocol. Security protocol for what? Isabella's voice rose. Adrian, what exactly do you do that requires armed guards and security protocols and… Isabella. Adrian's voice cut through her mounting hysteria like a blade. He turned to face her fully, and something in his expression made her take a step back. We need to talk. He led her to what he called his study, a room lined floor to ceiling with books, dominated by a massive desk. But Isabella barely noticed the decor. She was too focused on the wall of monitors showing security footage from every angle of the property. The gun safe in the corner. The multiple phones on the desk. Adrian poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey and gestured for Isabella to sit. She remained standing. You asked what I do, he said, settling into his chair like a king claiming his throne. I control territory, Isabella. I manage. Challenging employees. I resolve disputes that can't be handled through conventional channels. You're talking in riddles. I own this city's underworld. The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Drug distribution, gambling, protection services, import operations. If it's profitable and operates in the shadows, I have a piece of it. Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. You're actually the head of the most powerful crime family on the East Coast, Adrian finished calmly. Yes. Oh God, Isabella sank into the chair she'd been refusing. Oh God. Oh God. You didn't marry a businessman, Isabella. You married the king of this city's underworld. The room spun around her. This was impossible. People like this didn't exist outside of movies. They certainly didn't marry restaurant owners' daughters in cathedral ceremonies with 300 witnesses. This is insane, she whispered. You're insane. This whole thing is your new reality. Adrian's voice was gentle but implacable. You're part of this world now, whether you like it or not. I want to leave. I want to go home. This is your home. And leaving isn't an option. Isabella shot to her feet, rage overriding fear. You can't keep me here. This is kidnapping. This is marriage. Legal, binding, witnessed by half the city's elite. Adrian stood as well, moving around the desk with predatory grace. You signed the papers, Isabella. You said the vows. Under duress. You threatened my family. And that threat still stands. Adrian's eyes were arctic. Your safety, your family's safety, depends entirely on your cooperation. Isabella backed toward the door, but it opened before she could reach it. 2 of Adrian's men stepped inside, not threateningly, but clearly blocking her exit. I know this is overwhelming, Adrian continued, his voice almost kind. But you'll adjust. You'll have to. What if I don't? What if I refuse to adjust to being married to a criminal? Adrian smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Isabella had ever seen. Then you'll learn why I'm called the king, Isabella. And trust me, you don't want that education. As Isabella stared at her new husband, she realized with crystal clarity that she wasn't just trapped. She was owned. Isabella woke up in a bed larger than her childhood bedroom, surrounded by silk sheets that probably cost more than her car. For a blissful moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed down like a sledgehammer. She was Mrs. Adrian D'Angelo now, wife to a Mafia king. A soft knock interrupted her spiral of panic. Mrs. D'Angelo? I'm Maria, your personal assistant. Isabella sat up, pulling the covers around herself. A woman in her 50s stood in the doorway, carrying a silver tray that smelled like heaven. Personal assistant. Mr. D'Angelo thought you might need help adjusting, Maria said warmly, setting the tray on the bedside table. Fresh coffee, blueberry scones, and your schedule for the day. I have a schedule. Maria's smile faltered slightly. Hair appointment at 10, lunch with Mrs. Castellano at noon, dress fitting at 3, and dinner with Mr. D'Angelo at 7. Isabella stared at the neat handwriting on expensive stationery. I didn't agree to any of this. Mr. D'Angelo handles all the arrangements, Maria said carefully. He knows what's best. After Maria left, Isabella examined her new prison more closely. The walk-in closet was already filled with designer clothes in her exact size, dresses, shoes, handbags worth more than most people's annual salaries. Everything bore luxury labels she'd only seen in magazines. She tried on a simple sundress, amazed at how perfectly it fit. Adrian's people had been thorough. Disturbingly thorough. The sitting room adjoined the bedroom, decorated in soft blues and creams that should have been soothing but felt sterile. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the gardens, but Isabella noticed the bars hidden within the elegant ironwork. Beautiful. Expensive. Inescapable. A man in a dark suit waited in the hallway when she emerged. Mrs. D'Angelo? I'm Tony. I'll be your driver today. Driver? I have a car. Tony's expression remained neutral. Mr. D'Angelo prefers you use our transportation services. The transportation service turned out to be a bulletproof SUV with tinted windows and a second car following behind. Isabella felt like a celebrity. Or a prisoner. She wasn't sure there was a difference anymore. The hair salon was exclusive, the kind of place that didn't take walk-ins and charged a week's salary for a trim. Isabella endured 3 hours of primping while the stylist gushed about how lucky she was to have married such a wonderful man. If only they knew what kind of man Adrian really was. Lunch with Mrs. Castellano was even worse. The elderly woman spent 2 hours explaining the responsibilities of being a crime boss's wife, while Isabella pushed overpriced salad around her plate. You must understand, dear, Mrs. Castellano said, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin. Adrian has many enemies. People who would hurt him through you. That's why the security is so important. Security? The men watching you, the restricted movements, the careful vetting of everyone you meet. Mrs. Castellano's smile was maternal, but her eyes were sharp. It's not control, darling. It's protection. Isabella wanted to laugh. Or scream. Instead, she nodded and smiled and played the role of the grateful new wife. The dress fitting was torture. Standing on a pedestal while strangers measured and pinned, discussing her like she wasn't there. Evening gowns, cocktail dresses, formal wear for functions she hadn't agreed to attend. Mr. D'Angelo has excellent taste, the seamstress murmured, marking the hem of a black dress that cost more than Isabella's college tuition. He chose every piece personally. By the time she returned to the estate, Isabella felt like a doll being dressed for someone else's amusement. Tony escorted her to the door, where another guard waited to walk her inside. She was never alone, never unwatched, never free. She found Adrian in his study, speaking rapid Italian into one of his phones. When he saw her, he switched to English. Understood. Handle it quietly, he hung up and smiled at Isabella like he hadn't just ordered God knew what. How was your day? Exhausting. Isabella sank into the chair across from his desk. I'm not used to being managed. You'll adjust. Adrian poured 2 glasses of wine, offering her one. I had Maria prepare your favorite meal for dinner. How do you know what my favorite meal is? I know everything about you, Isabella. Your college transcripts, your employment history, your friends, your habits. Adrian's smile was almost fond. You prefer Italian food. Ironic, considering your heritage. You read romance novels when you think no one's watching. You donate to animal shelters even when you can barely afford it. Isabella's blood ran cold. You've been spying on me. Researching. There's a difference. No, there isn't. Isabella stood abruptly, wine sloshing in her glass. This is insane, Adrian. The guards, the monitoring, the complete control over my life is necessary. Adrian's voice hardened. You have no idea how dangerous this world is, Isabella. The people who would love to get their hands on my wife. Then maybe you should have married someone who actually wanted to be part of this world. Adrian set down his glass with deliberate care. Come here. Something in his tone made Isabella's protest die in her throat. She approached the desk slowly, every instinct screaming danger. Adrian pulled up security footage on his computer. This morning, a black sedan followed your car for 6 blocks before my men intercepted it. This afternoon, someone tried to access your parents' restaurant through the back entrance. Tonight, we found surveillance equipment planted across the street from this house. Isabella stared at the images, her mouth dry. What does that mean? It means my enemies are already moving. They know you're my weakness now. Adrian's eyes were deadly serious. The guards, the restrictions, the security measures, they're the only thing keeping you alive. But I never asked for this. No, you didn't. But it's what you have, Adrian stood, moving around the desk to face her. I won't apologize for protecting what's mine. Isabella backed away from the possessive heat in his voice. I'm not a possession. In this world, you are. My wife, my responsibility, my weakness. Adrian's hand cupped her face with surprising gentleness. But also my strength, if you'll let yourself be. That night, Isabella lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Adrian's world was more dangerous than she'd imagined, but that also meant he had more enemies than she'd realized. Enemies who might be willing to help her escape. As dawn crept through the barred windows, Isabella began to plan. She would find Adrian's weaknesses, his vulnerabilities, his pressure points. She would learn everything about his empire until she found the crack that would bring it all down. She just had to be smarter than the king of the underworld. How hard could that be? 2 weeks into her new life, Isabella discovered that being a mafia wife came with an education she'd never wanted. Pay attention, Adrian said, guiding her into a study where 3 men in expensive suits waited. This is how empires are built. Isabella took her designated seat beside Adrian's desk, playing the role of the dutiful wife, while her mind catalogued every detail. Names, faces, business terms that sounded legitimate but carried darker meanings. Adrian had started including her in select meetings, claiming it was important for her to understand the family business. She suspected it was another test. The shipping contract needs modification, one man was saying, sliding papers across Adrian's desk. The Morettas are pushing back on the territorial agreements. Then we remind them why territorial agreements exist. Adrian replied calmly, signing documents without looking up. Schedule a meeting. Bring appropriate incentives. Isabella had learned that incentives could mean anything from money to violence, depending on Adrian's mood. She kept her expression neutral while memorizing every word. After the men left, Adrian turned to her with something that might have been pride. What did you think? Efficient, Isabella said carefully. You handle disagreements quickly. The key is knowing which tool to use for which problem. Adrian's fingers drummed against his desk. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes it's pressure. Sometimes he let the sentence hang. That evening, Isabella sat in the garden with her laptop, supposedly answering emails from well-wishers. In reality, she was documenting everything she'd learned. Names, locations, business operations. Every piece of information that might prove useful later. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mrs. D'Angelo? We need to talk. Coffee tomorrow, 2 p.m., Riverside Cafe. Come alone. A friend. Isabella stared at the message, her heart pounding. Someone was reaching out. Someone who might be able to help her escape this nightmare. She deleted the message and went inside, mind racing. The next day, Isabella convinced Tony she needed to visit her mother. It wasn't entirely a lie. She did stop by the hospital first, spending an hour with her mother, who looked healthier than she had in months. Adrian's insurance was covering treatments Isabella's family could never have afforded. Blood money, but her mother was alive because of it. Isabella slipped away from Tony during shift change, using a back exit she'd memorized weeks ago. The cafe was busy enough to provide cover, and she spotted her contact immediately, a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and nervous energy. Sarah Chin, investigative journalist. The woman said as Isabella sat down. I've been tracking your husband's organization for 2 years. I don't know what you're talking about, Isabella replied automatically. Cut the act. We know you didn't choose this marriage, Sarah leaned forward. Adrian D'Angelo is responsible for at least 15 murders, millions in money laundering, and a drug operation that spans 3 states. We can bring him down, but we need inside information. Isabella's hands trembled around her coffee cup. What kind of information? Financial records, meeting schedules, safe combinations, computer passwords. Anything that proves what he really is. Sarah's voice was urgent. You're in a unique position to help us destroy him. And if I get caught, then you disappear. Just like the others who crossed him, Sarah slid a burner phone across the table. Think about it. You could have your life back. That night, Isabella lay in bed turning the phone over in her hands. Freedom was within reach, but the cost could be everything. Still, what choice did she have? Stay trapped forever, or fight back? She chose to fight. Over the next few weeks, Isabella became the perfect Mafia wife. She attended charity galas, smiled for photographers, and played hostess at dinner parties. All while feeding information to Sarah through encrypted messages. Meeting locations, security rotations, names of Adrian's key associates. She was careful, clever, only passing along information she could have overheard naturally. Adrian seemed pleased with her transformation. You're adapting well, he told her one evening, pouring wine as they dined alone. I'm impressed. I'm a quick learner, Isabella replied, letting her fingers brush his as she accepted the glass. She discovered that small touches, brief smiles, and carefully timed compliments made Adrian more open, more trusting. The attraction between them was becoming impossible to ignore. When Adrian looked at her with those storm-gray eyes, Isabella felt a dangerous flutter in her chest. When he touched her hand or stood close enough that she could smell his cologne, her pulse raced for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. It was terrifying how easy it was to forget what he really was when he smiled at her like she mattered. I have something for you, Adrian said, producing a velvet box. Inside was a necklace that took Isabella's breath away, diamonds and sapphires arranged in an intricate pattern that caught the light like captured stars. It's beautiful, she whispered and meant it. Adrian moved behind her chair to fasten the necklace, his fingers brushing the sensitive skin of her neck. It belonged to my grandmother. She would have liked you. The moment felt intimate, dangerous. Isabella found herself leaning into his touch before catching herself. Thank you, she managed. Wear to the Rossi dinner tomorrow night. It's an important evening. Adrian's breath was warm against her ear. The Rossis control the port operations. Their loyalty ensures half our shipments arrive safely. Isabella nodded, already composing the message she'd send to Sarah. Port operations, Rossi family, shipment information. Another piece of the puzzle. She didn't notice Adrian's slight smile as he returned to his seat, or the way his eyes tracked her every micro-expression. She didn't see him glance at the security monitor showing the angle of their table, where high-definition cameras captured every word they'd spoken. Isabella believed she was playing a careful game, feeding information to the enemy while maintaining her cover. She had no idea that Adrian had been 3 moves ahead since the moment she'd met Sarah Chin. Every piece of information she'd passed along, every secret meeting, every encrypted message, Adrian knew about all of it. He'd been orchestrating her betrayal from the beginning, watching as she dug her own grave with increasing confidence. Tomorrow night, Isabella would learn just how dangerous it was to play games with the devil. But tonight, she went to sleep believing she was finally winning. Isabella was choosing earrings for the Rossi dinner when the explosion started. The first blast shook the entire house, sending her jewelry box crashing to the floor. She ran to the window just as the second explosion lit up the night sky, somewhere in the direction of the city's industrial district. Her phone buzzed.
Sarah.
Perfect timing. The Moretus hit 3 of his warehouses simultaneously. Your information about the security rotations was spot on. Isabella's blood turned to ice. She hadn't just provided information about a dinner party. She'd given them the exact details they needed to kill people. Shouts echoed from downstairs. Men running, car engines roaring to life, the sharp bark of orders being given. Isabella grabbed her robe and rushed to the hallway, where chaos had erupted. Adrian stood in the foyer like the eye of a hurricane, fully dressed despite the late hour, barking orders into multiple phones while his men armed themselves with military efficiency. Warehouse 7 is gone, someone was reporting. Marco and his entire team. I know. Adrian cut him off, his voice deadly calm. Warehouse 3? 6 men down. They knew exactly where to hit, when to hit, how many guards would be there. Isabella pressed herself against the wall, horror washing over her in waves. 6 men down. Marco's entire team. Dead because of information she provided. This was coordinated. Adrian continued, his steel-gray eyes scanning the room. Someone gave them our security schedules, our patrol routes, our guard rotations. His gaze found Isabella on the stairs. Everyone out, Adrian said quietly.
Now.
The room emptied instantly, leaving them alone. Adrian climbed the stairs slowly, his expression unreadable. Isabella backed toward their bedroom, her heart hammering. Adrian, Save it, his voice was arctic. We both know what you've been doing. Isabella's mouth went dry. I don't know what you mean. Riverside Cafe. Sarah Chun. Encrypted messages on a burner phone you thought I didn't know about. Adrian reached the top of the stairs, moving with predatory grace. Did you really think I would notice my wife sneaking around the city? You were watching me? I watch everything that matters to me. Adrian stepped closer, and Isabella saw something in his eyes that was worse than rage. Disappointment. What I can't figure out is why you thought the Morettis would let you live after this. The Morettis? Sarah works for the FBI. Sarah Chun works for Vincent Moretti. She's been feeding you lies about justice and freedom while you handed over everything they needed to destroy me. Adrian's laugh was bitter. You thought you were playing me, Isabella. But you were the one being played. The world tilted around Isabella. That's impossible. She showed me credentials.
Fake.
Just like her promises to keep you safe. Adrian pulled out his phone, showing her a photo that made her knees buckle. Sarah Chun, the woman who'd promised to help her, sitting across a restaurant table from a man Isabella recognized from Adrian's security briefings. Vincent Moretti, head of the rival family that had been trying to destroy Adrian for years. No, Isabella whispered. No, that can't be right. They played you perfectly. Fed you exactly what you wanted to hear, that you could escape, that you could have your freedom back. Adrian's voice was clinical, like he was discussing a business transaction. All they needed was someone inside my organization. Someone I'd trust with sensitive information. Isabella sank onto the top step, her legs giving out. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. 8 good men are dead because you wanted your freedom more than you cared about the consequences. The words hit her like physical blows. Isabella doubled over, nausea rolling through her. Oh God, I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't bring them back. What happens now? Isabella looked up at him through tears. Do you kill me? Kill you? Adrian's expression shifted, something almost like pity flickering across his features. Isabella, you're not my enemy. You're a naive girl who got used by people who are very good at using people. Then what? The Morettis won't stop with the warehouses. They'll come for you next, use you as leverage to force me to surrender my territory. Adrian crouched down, meeting her eyes. Sarah Chun played you, but she also signed your death warrant. The moment you stop being useful to them, you become a liability. Isabella's phone buzzed. Another message from Sarah. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Be ready. Adrian read the message over her shoulder. They're not done with you yet. What does that mean? It means they're planning to take you. Use your kidnapping to force me into a position where I have to choose between my empire and my wife. Adrian stood, pacing the hallway. What they don't understand is that threatening you just escalated this war to a level they're not prepared for. What about my family? Isabella's voice was barely a whisper. If the Morettis know I helped them, your family is already being moved to a safe house. They'll be protected. Adrian's expression softened slightly. I keep my promises, Isabella, even when you break yours. The guilt was crushing. Isabella had thought she was being clever, thought she was fighting for her freedom. Instead, she'd been a pawn in someone else's war, and good men had died because of it. "I'm sorry," she said again, the words feeling inadequate. "I'm so sorry, Adrian. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. I know." Adrian looked older suddenly, tired in a way she'd never seen before. But intention doesn't matter in this world. Only consequences. "What do we do now?" Adrian's expression hardened, and Isabella glimpsed the ruthless man who commanded an empire through fear and respect. Now we remind the Morettus why people call me the king." His smile was sharp as a blade. "And we make sure they never underestimate what I'll do to protect what's mine." As sirens wailed in the distance and smoke rose from the burning warehouses, Isabella realized she'd just learned the most dangerous lesson of all. In Adrian's world, there were no innocent mistakes. Only survival. Isabella woke up in darkness, her head pounding and her wrists bound behind her back. The last thing she remembered was walking to her car after a tense lunch with her mother at the hospital. Tony had been called away for an urgent matter, and the replacement driver had seemed nervous. She should have known. Sleeping Beauty awakens, a voice said from the shadows. Vincent Moretti stepped into the dim light filtering through dirty windows. He was younger than Isabella had expected, maybe 40, with dark hair and cold eyes that reminded her uncomfortably of Adrian. "Where am I?" Isabella's voice came out as a croak. "Somewhere your husband will never find you. Unless he's willing to make a deal." Vincent pulled up a metal chair. Sitting backward on it like this was a casual conversation. "You know, Isabella, you did excellent work for us. Better than we hoped. I didn't know I was working for you." "Of course not." Sarah played her role perfectly. The righteous journalist, the promise of freedom, the appeal to your conscience. Vincent's smile was predatory. "You wanted so badly to believe there was a way out that you never questioned her story." Isabella tested her bonds. Zip ties, cutting into her wrists. The room looked like an abandoned warehouse, with broken windows and the smell of rust and decay. "What do you want?" "Your husband's empire. His territory, his connections, his legitimate businesses." Vincent leaned forward. "Adrian D'Angelo has been a thorn in my family's side for too long. But he's also smart, careful, nearly untouchable." "Nearly? Everyone has a weakness. Even kings." Vincent's eyes glittered. "You're his." Isabella's stomach dropped. "He won't trade his empire for me. Won't he? Let's find out." Vincent pulled out his phone, dialing a number Isabella recognized. Adrian answered on the first ring. "You have something that belongs to me." Adrian's voice was controlled, but Isabella could hear the deadly undertone. "I have your wife. She's alive for now." Vincent put the call on speaker. "But her continued health depends entirely on your cooperation." "What do you want?" "Everything. Your territory, your operations, your connections. Walk away from it all, and I'll let her live." There was a long pause. Isabella held her breath, part of her hoping Adrian would choose her, part of her knowing he couldn't sacrifice his entire empire. "You have 2 hours to consider my offer," Vincent continued. "After that, I start sending you pieces of her." "Vincent," Adrian's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper, and even through the phone, it sent chills down Isabella's spine. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." The line went dead. Vincent looked pleased with himself. 2 hours, he told Isabella. "Let's see how much you're really worth to the great Adrian D'Angelo." What Vincent didn't understand was that he'd just declared war on a man who had spent 15 years building an empire through calculated violence and strategic terror. A man who didn't just command respect, he commanded fear. The first sign something was wrong came exactly 90 minutes later, when Vincent's phone started ringing nonstop. "What do you mean the warehouse is on fire?" Vincent barked into the phone. "Which warehouse?" Isabella listened as Vincent's world began to crumble in real time. 3 more warehouses destroyed. 2 of his lieutenants found dead in their cars. His money laundering operation raided by federal agents who seemed to know exactly where to look. "This is impossible," Vincent muttered, pacing the room. "He can't move this fast." The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in hellish red. In the distance, Isabella could hear gunfire. Shouting. The sound of vehicles approaching fast. "Boss, we need to move," one of Vincent's men called out, bursting through the door. "D'Angelo's people are everywhere. It's like they knew exactly where we'd be." Because they did, Isabella realized with a start. Adrian had been tracking her somehow. Probably had been since the day they married. "Kill her," Vincent ordered, pulling out a gun. "If I can't have his empire, he can watch his wife die." The man raised his weapon toward Isabella just as the windows exploded inward. Dark figures rappelled through the openings with military precision, automatic weapons sweeping the room. "Drop your weapons."
Now.
Vincent's men barely had time to react before they were cut down with surgical efficiency. Isabella watched in shocked awe as Adrian's people moved like a special forces unit, eliminating threats with cold professionalism. Then Adrian himself stepped through the smoke, and Isabella's breath caught. She'd seen him angry before, seen him cold and calculating. But this was something else entirely. This was the man who'd built an empire through fear, who commanded absolute loyalty through a combination of respect and terror. His eyes were arctic, his movements controlled but predatory. Vincent raised his gun toward Isabella, but Adrian was faster. The shot echoed through the warehouse, and Vincent crumpled to the ground, clutching his shoulder. "You wanted to see what I'd do for her?" Adrian asked conversationally, stepping over Vincent's writhing form. "You just got your answer." He reached Isabella in 3 strides, cutting her bonds with a knife that appeared from nowhere. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm—" Isabella's voice broke as the adrenaline crashed over her. "Adrian, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault." "No." Adrian's hands cupped her face, his thumb brushing away tears. She didn't realize she was crying. "This is on me. I should have protected you better. You came for me." The words came out as a whisper. "You risked everything to come for me." "Isabella," Adrian's voice was rough with emotion she'd never heard before. "I would burn this entire city to the ground before I let anyone hurt you." Looking into his eyes, Isabella finally understood what she'd been too blind to see before. The protection, the security, the careful control, none of it had been about owning her. It had been about loving her. "I chose wrong," she whispered. "When I betrayed you, I chose wrong. You chose survival. I understand that." Adrian helped her to her feet, his arms steady around her waist. "But now you need to choose again." "What do you mean? Do you want out? Do you want me to arrange a new identity, relocate you somewhere safe?" Adrian's expression was carefully neutral.
Or, do you want to stay?
"Knowing what this world really is, what I really am." Isabella looked around the warehouse, at the destroyed enemies, at the loyal men who'd risked their lives to save her, at the man who just proved he'd tear apart anyone who threatened her. For the first time since their wedding, she understood what Adrian had been trying to tell her. She wasn't his prisoner. She was his queen. "I want to stay," she said firmly. "I want to be your partner, not your victim." Adrian's smile was brilliant and dangerous and full of promises. "Then let's go home, Mrs. D'Angelo. We have an empire to rebuild." 3 months after the warehouse, Isabella stood in Adrian's study watching him end a war. "The Moretti assets are being liquidated as we speak," Marcus, Adrian's lieutenant, reported. "Their remaining territory has been absorbed into our operations. The family that's ruled the docks for 30 years no longer exists." Isabella sipped her wine, no longer flinching at discussions of destroyed lives and eliminated enemies. The naive girl who'd tried to sabotage an arranged marriage was gone, replaced by someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. "What about the federal investigation?" she asked, and Marcus turned to her with the same respect he showed Adrian. "The agents who raided our competitors seem to have had very accurate intelligence about Moretti operations," Marcus replied carefully. "But nothing that traces back to us." Isabella smiled. She'd learned to speak in code, to ask the right questions, to understand the implications behind every careful word. The FBI had been hunting Adrian for years, but they'd never realized that Isabella had fed them just enough real information about the Morettus to destroy his enemies while protecting his empire. Excellent work, Adrian said, dismissing Marcus with a nod. When they were alone, he turned to Isabella with something like pride. You're getting very good at this. I had an excellent teacher. Isabella moved to stand behind his chair, her hands resting on his shoulders. The casual intimacy would have terrified her months ago. Now it felt natural, necessary. Any regrets? Adrian asked, leaning back into her touch. Isabella considered the question seriously. 3 months ago, she would have said yes without hesitation.
But now?
Now she understood what real power felt like. Not the power to destroy, but the power to protect what mattered. None, she said finally. Though I do have a proposal. Adrian raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. The Romano restaurants. We should expand them. Your father's business? My business now. Isabella moved around to face him, settling on the edge of his desk. Daddy's ready to retire, and the restaurants are perfect fronts for money laundering. Plus, they give us legitimate presence in neighborhoods we're trying to penetrate. Adrian's smile was sharp with approval. You want to turn your family's legacy into part of our empire. I want to turn it into something bigger than Daddy ever imagined. Isabella's voice was steady, confident. The Romano name has respect in this city. I want to use that respect to build something lasting. And your parents? How do you explain their daughter becoming a businesswoman overnight? They think you're encouraging my entrepreneurial spirit. Daddy's thrilled that his little girl is finally showing interest in the family business. Isabella laughed, and there was nothing innocent about the sound. They have no idea their daughter is about to become one of the most powerful women in the city. Adrian stood, moving to stand between her legs, his hands bracing on either side of her hips. You realize there's no going back from this. Once you're openly part of the business, you become a target. I've been a target since I married you. The difference is now I'm choosing to be 1 inch. Isabella's fingers traced the collar of his shirt. Besides, I have the best security in the city. You have something better than security. Adrian's voice was rough with emotion. You have me. The words hung between them, heavy with promise and threat, and something deeper than either. Isabella had fought this feeling for months, told herself it was Stockholm Syndrome or survival instinct. But watching Adrian tear apart an empire to save her had shattered every lie she'd been telling herself. She was in love with her husband. Completely, terrifyingly, irrevocably in love with the most dangerous man in the city. Adrian, she started, but he silenced her with a kiss that tasted like power and possession and promises. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. You are not my weakness, Isabella, he said quietly. You are my queen. Then treat me like one. Isabella's voice was steady, sure. Make me your partner in everything. Not just the legitimate business, not just the safe operations. Everything. You don't know what you're asking for. I'm asking to rule beside you, to be feared and respected in my own right. Isabella's eyes blazed with ambition that would have shocked her former self. I'm asking to be your equal, not your protected princess. Adrian studied her face for a long moment, and Isabella knew he was seeing the same transformation she felt. The scared girl who'd walked into that arranged marriage meeting was gone. In her place sat a woman who understood power, who craved it, who was willing to do whatever it took to seize it. The Romano restaurant's expansion, Adrian said finally. You'll handle it personally. Full authority, full responsibility. And if I fail, you won't. But if you do, you'll handle the consequences personally too. Adrian's smile was proud and dangerous. Welcome to the Empire, Mrs. D'Angelo. 6 months later, Isabella stood on the balcony of their estate, watching the city spread out below them like a kingdom awaiting orders. The Romano restaurant chain had expanded to 12 locations, each one a perfectly legitimate business that also served as a distribution hub for Adrian's operations. Her name was spoken with respect in boardrooms and fear in back alleys. She wore a black dress that cost more than most people's cars and diamonds that had once belonged to European royalty. But more importantly, she wore power like a second skin. Adrian joined her on the balcony, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. The city council approved the waterfront development project. Of course they did. I made them an offer they couldn't refuse. Isabella leaned back against his chest. The new restaurants will give us control of the entire harbor district. Our empire, Adrian murmured against her ear. Our empire, Isabella agreed. She thought about the girl who'd tried to sabotage an arranged marriage, who'd believed freedom meant running away from responsibility. That girl had been a fool. Real freedom wasn't about escaping power, it was about seizing it. Isabella D'Angelo, the Empire Bride, ruled beside the king of the underworld not as his victim or his trophy, but as his equal. And, together, they were unstoppable. In the distance, the city lights twinkled like stars, each one representing territory they controlled, people who answered to them, power that belonged to them. Isabella smiled and began planning their next conquest.